Things that only collectors understand. For starters, how about having to explain to people why we collect at all? I mean, having my bread bag clip collection isn't just about knowing I'm better than everyone, it's about knowing I'm better than the specific people who have ever doubted me. Can they say they have an orange with a sticker on it? I don't think so. When it comes to explaining why we collect video games the way we do, the simple assumed answer of because we like them doesn't always suffice, does it? After all, you can like video games with a collection that looks like this, all digital, baby, and quite the space saver. Now, we've certainly got our reasons for why we prefer physical copies, but one of the main reasons I always go back to is that you're able to sell your games if you decide to, which you don't always know if you will or not at the time of purchase. Of which the counter argument from the pro-digital folks is often not a problem for me because I don't sell my games. Well, of course you don't. You can't. I don't do backflips off my toilet either. I think most collectors would agree that having a physical copy of a game just feels more substantial than a digital copy of a game. It feels more like you actually have something. This feels like more than this. And sure, you can always browse through your games if some of them are digital, but it's still not as tangible. If there's one problem that any collector can immediately relate to, it's when you want to own a physical copy of a game, but you can't. Sometimes it's because a publisher says, "Oh, people wanted that? We don't care." But sometimes it's because your wallet says no. In fact, before I purchased Earthbound years ago, I caught my wallet trying to end it all. But it survived. If you're a collector, you've got a list. Oops, that's my grocery list. But you've likely got a list of all the games you want, and heck, you might even have it divided into different tiers, with some games being more desired than others. And these are the games that have potentially been torturing you, staring back at you from your list, a reminder that you still don't have it. What really boils my onions is the newer games that I'm not even sure if they'll ever get a physical release. I've been holding out for a physical copy of Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, and as you can see, I caved in and finally bought a digital copy because I'm starting to doubt a physical copy is ever going to happen. Also starting to doubt my choice of the Legend difficulty setting. And sure, I'm still hoping for a physical release, but at this point, I might as well start hoping for some other things that are just as likely while I'm at it. The Banana Car is legitimately on my list now, though. If there was a guarantee that every game that gets a digital release first will eventually get a physical release, it would take a lot of the drama out of it. I still have to pinch myself to make sure my copy of Cuphead is real. But because there's no guarantee, you can find yourself on the fence. Do you hold out and wait for that physical copy, or just say to heck with it, buy the digital copy, and plan to double dip if it ever does release in physical form? My guess, besides the ability to add in any extra content, is that publishers know we're suckers and will probably double dip if they wait long enough to release a physical copy. What's also important to many collectors is when older games get new releases. If you've been wanting the old original copy of a game, but it's really expensive, having it released on modern consoles can be just what the doctor ordered. Not only because it's cheaper, and depending how you feel about it, more convenient to have on modern hardware, but a lot of times it will also bring down the price of the original copy of the game, if you are indeed still dead set on getting it in that form. Sometimes the price drop is only temporary, but as a general rule, having multiple ways to own a game will make the price cheaper than it would be otherwise, something Panzer Dragoon Saga would know nothing about. But even when older games do receive a release on newer hardware, any collector knows, before you get too excited, old games being re-released on modern hardware is prime real estate for once again not being released physically. Typically, unless it's in a compilation, the chances aren't good, and even then, it's no guarantee. Games simply being announced isn't good enough for us collectors. We need to know there will be a physical copy, and until this gets confirmed, you better believe we're gonna flog the comments of any article discussing the announcement with questions and or demands for a physical release. The Pikmin 1 and 2 HD releases stated right away that physical releases would be happening. Great, now what am I supposed to do with my Saturday night? I had a bunch of demanding comments ready to go. When I search for any updates on a potential physical release for Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, all I ever find are other people asking the same question. Alright, but enough about games we wish we had. Let's talk about the games that actually make it into our collections. Remember when I talked about how good doing this feels? There is nothing like adding a game to your collection, except for looking for the next game you're gonna get, especially if it's one you've been wanting for a long time. This one's got its manual and now I understand how my wallet feels. But yeah, that's part of the deal when buying online, which pretty much every collector has done at some point. And sure, in a lot of cases, you can just return it, but that's still just wasted time, and ideally, you'd like to get it right the first time. The most common problem I've run into is actually something you can't notice from pictures, and that would be the smell, especially for anything that has a paper manual. Cigarette smoke. Great, why didn't you just tell me your game smells like an ashtray? That would have been such a selling point. Now, I suppose this wouldn't bother some people as much as others, but even among smokers, would you really like games smelling like somebody else's smoke? From what I understand, smokers are often particular about what brand they're into. In any case, getting rid of the smell can be, well, fabric softener sheets are the only thing that get rid of it from my experience. But then your game will smell like fabric softener pretty much forever. And when you receive a game that already smells like fabric softener, right away you think, oh, I know what happened here. Okay, but now for one of my favorite parts, how collectors organize their games. For some collectors, the amount of time, effort, and thought put into organizing games can sometimes be more than the amount of time spent actually playing the games. And when you factor in the time required to stare at all of it, well, maybe we don't even need to play our games at all, do we? Typically, a collector will have some sort of overall plan or scheme for how they want to organize everything. All the Nintendo games are close to each other, or maybe organized by generation, but it can't always work out like it does in the fairy tales, now can it? Japanese Mega Drive games next to a Wavebird controller? Sure, because that's where it fits. But no matter what you do, utilizing the space you have to make it all look good is of the essence. Although, perhaps not as much for those who are less inspired, but who knows, perhaps putting less effort into how your games are displayed frees up more time for actually playing them. Just need to look at the game for 3 seconds as you put it into the console and you're good. That said, it's not just organizing your collection that can take time away from playing games. Like I touched on earlier, it's the pursuit of more games. For a lot of us, it can feel endless. But even the folks who aren't utilizing their lunch breaks to sneak off and scope out a potential Facebook Marketplace ad are as susceptible as anyone to the never-ending search for that next game, which might be occurring in your mind. Check this out. What does it look like I'm doing here? Folding socks? Wrong answer. I'm just buying myself time to think about how I can get my hands on a copy of River City Ransom. And the scope of what the average collector is looking for isn't exactly limited either, namely, every game ever made. And even though you're not looking for every game ever made, sometimes it can feel like you're willing to consider every game ever made in order to narrow it down to what you want. One day you might think, what if I started collecting ColecoVision games? Then I could call myself a ColecoVision person. I could pull that off, right? And then you've got yourself a whole nother library to consider. Alright, but that about does it for the things that I could come up with that most collectors will understand. That said, I'd love to hear what else all of you can come up with. Write it in the comments, and then it might be fun to read others' comments and see how many things you can relate to that others have come up with. So with that, leave your comment down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro